Republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. I'll be joined by a couple of my staff infection. Mike and Fast Eddie, maybe Kurt. We're going to cover a number of topics and issues this morning, which we want to make sure that we have a chance to spend a few minutes about. Starting with drones, there's been a lot of contention out there about drones used domestically, used for perhaps more nefarious purposes than just border security, and we're going to address some of that this morning. We also want to talk about something which America is not really aware of, but should be. They have been negotiating for a long, long time, in secret. The United States has been working in concert with Europe and the European Union on a trans-Pacific, or I shouldn't say trans-Pacific, it's a transatlantic regulatory trade partnership. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the TTIP and what that means, it's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. We're going to talk a little bit about that because what it requires is that America do a merger, if you will, with the European Union, both economically but also politically, which would require that the United States turn its sovereignty over to an international body. Yes, you heard exactly what I said. It would require that the United States turn its national sovereignty over to an international body. If that doesn't scare you, stick with us until we address that this morning. And by the time I finish with this topic, you're going to be up in arms. It is a frightening plan to effectively merge the United States of America and the European Union together underneath a global banking and political infrastructure framework that would necessarily require us to abandon our sovereignty as a nation, an independent nation state. This is being negotiated as we speak. In fact, there's articles all over the place out there about it. If you're interested, you can simply type in the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership into any browser, and you'll see gamuts of information. They won't give you any of the specifics because, frankly, the specifics are being done and negotiated in secret. And while treaties traditionally are something which requires the ratification of our Senate, the fact that it's being negotiated in secret and hidden from the eyes of the American public and unavailable to us for review while it's being negotiated so that we might have input on it is unacceptable. So we're going to address this and take a quick look at it. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't ever take a quick look at anything. As most of you know, I try to get down into the weeds to do more than just report on something that's out there going on. Because just the concept of talking about it and giving it a 30-second soundbite is the problem that America has been experiencing for the past 30 or 40 years. The people who are talking to you and giving you information give you this 30-second soundbite, and they give you their quick analysis of it in 30 seconds. something that requires the United States turn its sovereignty over to the European Union, I think deserves more than 30 seconds, don't you? Yeah, that's what I thought. So let's jump first and foremost to the issue of these use of drones, because as you're aware, the issue of drones and their use for local law enforcement and or border security has been a pretty hot topic of late. And we know that they use them overseas. I talked to you last week about the fact that for the first time ever, we had a 100% fully automated drone that was able to land on an aircraft carrier. This is a $1.4 billion deployment of or project to build a drone that could operate without human intervention. And the crucial holy grail of tests was, could it land on a moving aircraft carrier without human interaction or intervention? In other words, piloting. It was successful. They built 2 of these. They'll now be mothballed. You got to go figure, right? We spent $1.4 billion to build these things to do one thing, to land it on a ship. Unconscionable, but true. And so now we have the issue of drone use, not only over land, but over sea. It opens up the door for drones to be launched from aircraft carriers, to be deployed over land, and it also enables the use of drones in foreign countries where they won't give us air rights, if you will, to traverse their airspace. So in any event, the real issue here on drones is that local law enforcement along the border areas have been allowing drones, or I should say the border security has been allowing their drones to be used by local law enforcement, but not for the purposes of border enforcement, for the purposes of surveillance. And the amazing part of this, of course, is that, all right, we already know that we live in a police state. You may not completely acknowledge and buy into that at this point, but if you've got your eyes open, I don't know how you can't. What we are looking at, though, is drones that are supposed to be designated and tasked for border security, which are being used more and more and more for domestic surveillance, not of border violators, but plain Jane Americans. The flight logs from the Customs and Border Protection were obtained by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Now, there's a couple of organizations out there you need to know about. One is the EFF. They're the Electronic Frontier Foundation. The other is Judicial Watch. And these two organizations are pretty powerful organizations. And I encourage you to learn more about them and to support them, because these two organizations are the groups that, for the most part, are the most successful in filing these Freedom of Information Acts to find out exactly what is going on with all of these different programs, projects, administrative agencies, you know, the unconscionable abuses and misuses of government and malfeasance. Anyway, the EFF was able to obtain these flight logs. You know, most people, when you file a Freedom of Information Act, you get spun around and blown off by these federal agencies. And they do everything in their power to actually bar you from ever gaining access to what they consider secured information. But anyway, they obtained this, and in their summary of these documents, the number of Customs and Border Protection flights which were flown by organizations other than, or on behalf of organizations other than Customs and Border Protection, has increased eightfold between 2010 and 2012. And they failed to explain how this use of these drones is protecting our privacy, one, from unwarranted surveillance, and two, how it's really affecting border security. These Predator drones, by the way, and that's what they are. These are the same drones, for all intents and purposes, that they use over in Afghanistan or over in Pakistan or over in anywhere in the Middle East. The difference is they're not armed. That's the only difference, by the way. And so the issue is that these flights are being used or misused not for purposes of border security and surveillance, but generic domestic surveillance. And they're being done at the county level by sheriff's departments, law enforcement, city law enforcement. And that's not what we paid for them for, number one. And number two, we have a crisis on our border, irrespective of what the mainstream Ministry of Propaganda tells you. And irrespective of what this liar of a president tells you, we have a major border problem. So when these drones are being used for purposes other than border, you got to wonder if that's not some kind of a shell game where border security is used as the excuse to purchase them, but then they're being retasked for other purposes. The number of these drones out there, by the way, is being increased. They're about to increase their fleet to a total of 24 of these drones and begin doing surveillance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by 2016. Well, the question is, if we have these drones, why aren't we using them for 24-hour, 7-day-a-week surveillance on the border where the problem really lies? And number two, if we are using them less than 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, why are we using them for anything other than border security? You can't tell me that this fleet of drones can adequately surveil this entire border. If that were the case, we wouldn't have a border problem, would we? And of course, closing our borders down is directly related to the immigration bill. As you know, the Senate's passed the immigration bill. It's now gone to the House. They swear that they don't like it, and they're going to create their own version of it. Eric Cantor, the House Minority Leader, has come out with a bill which very, very much resembles the DREAM Act of Obama, which allows children of illegals to be classified as American citizens automatically and therefore qualify for everything from food stamps to free college and any other penny they can throw at them. This is all in some misguided effort to try to elicit the Hispanic vote for the Republicans. And it's being prodded by the likes, of course, of Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, who, educate the Republicans by saying, if you guys don't do this, you're never going to win another seat again. Well, if you're fool enough to believe that Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid actually have the Republicans' best interest at heart, I think you must be living under a rock somewhere. In fact, I don't think you have electricity to plug in a radio. The simple truth is that this immigration problem we have and the border's wide open history is exactly what we want from the government's perspective. It allows a massive influx of illegals. It allows in a massive influx of people who can do harm to this nation under terroristic purposes or for terroristic purposes. What that inevitably means to you is that when they do whatever it is that they intend to do and what they're coming over here to do, they get an opportunity to scream and jump around and say, see, we should have done this and we should have had more power to do that, and this surveillance is so warranted, and that's why the NSA can read everybody's email and look inside your underwear. What they're doing is they're building justification for themselves to conduct unwarranted surveillance, unconstitutional abuses, and basically turn us into a modern version of the KGB and the Stasi in terms of a police state. So the upshot is, what we have are drones that are not only being used for the purposes of law enforcement, which is not what they were tasked for, in other words, non-border law enforcement, but now here comes the real mix. Here comes the real problem. The nominee to head the FBI has come out and explained his policy on drones. And I want you to hear it because it's revealing. This is Obama's nominee to head the FBI. And he told senators in a hearing that he's opposed to the use of drones to kill Americans inside the United States. unless they qualified as imminent threat to the security of the homeland. Well, imminent threat, as we know from the previous abuses of verbicide by our government, can mean virtually anything. What quantifies or qualifies as imminent? What qualifies as a threat? How do you quantify that? Because imminent threat could mean anything. At a hearing in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, it was conducted about a week ago, the FBI, or proposed FBI director, James Comey, testified that targeting U.S. citizens for drone assassination should be an option. Really? Only when imminent threats are prevalent, although he failed to define the crucial term. Well, no kidding. His comment came in response to a question that was issued by Senator Ted Cruz. And by the way, out of all of the guys in the Senate, Cruz appears to me to be about the only one who really has his head on straight in a constitutional format. And Cruz asked Comey if he believed that the Constitution allows the United States government to use a drone to target with lethal force a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil, if that individual does not pose an imminent threat. Comey responded he did not believe it did. The first problem is that question was tailored in the wrong way. The real issue here is that when we talk about whether or not drone use should be domestically applied, especially when we're talking about using lethal force on a U.S. citizen, all we have to do is look overseas to see the example of how they do it. You know, they target someone that they say is a suspected militant, and then they kill him, and everyone within distance of him, or whatever the bomb is that they use. And we know from past historical experience, but which the Ministry of Propaganda will not tell you about, how many people are dying who are collateral damage. Now, collateral in this case is the innocent people who happen to just be around that individual when the bomb falls. And we know that those numbers are staggering. They don't tell us what those numbers are, and the media doesn't release those because they don't want us, or you specifically, to know exactly how many, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of innocent people have been killed while trying to get 5 or 10 suspected, alleged militants. Well, that's all well and good, as long as they're in the Middle East, you say. Well, what happens when the suspected militant is in Indiana? What happens when the suspected militant is in Austin, Texas? What happens when the suspected militant is in L.A., New York, Chicago, St. Louis, Springfield, or West Plains? You see, the problem here is that this is indiscriminate murder. And this administration has so much blood on its hands, not just American blood, but foreigners as well. If you wonder why everyone in the world hates us, this is one of the reasons. We are arrogant, overbearing, imperialistic, and we constantly abuse the civil rights and the human rights of people around the world, not to mention our own citizenry. So when we talk about a guy who's being nominated to head up the FBI, and we look at all the scandals that have been going on with the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, the IRS, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and half a dozen other alphabet soup organizations, you got to wonder about the motivations of a guy who thinks it's okay to kill U.S. citizens on U.S. soil as long as the threat is imminent. I don't know about you, but I've got some deep concerns about that. And their testimony is key. Because what you have to remember is, as a critical thinker, your job is to read between the lines and understand exactly what they are saying. So when they say that Mueller, who's the current head of FBI and is leaving, when Mueller says it's very seldom used and generally used in a particular incident when you need the capability, it is very narrowly focused on particularized cases and particularized need. He's talking about drone surveillance on domestic citizens here. What are those particularized cases and needs? And what are the incidences where you need that capability and you can't do it any other way? And how long will it be before that same attitude is applied towards the use of lethal drone use in the United States? The FAA is getting ready to license literally 30,000 drones to be used across the United States of America, domestically on our soil. If you do the math and you just break that down, that's 600 per state, assuming it's equally divided. Where in God's name are you going to deploy 600 drones in the state of Missouri? Really? Think about that. I mean, what exactly is it that about the Fourth Amendment that we have the right to be secure in our persons, in our houses, in our papers, and our effects against unreasonable search and seizure that this government just does not grasp? Is your backyard, your front yard, your farm, your ranch, your wife or your girlfriend laying out in front of the swimming pool, is that not part of your right to be secure in your person, your house, your papers, and your effects? Is drone monitoring on Americans not an unreasonable search? What have you done wrong? What's the probable cause? The same questions can be asked of the NSA spying scandal. Just because you have an email account doesn't make you a potential terrorist. Just because you use the internet doesn't make you a potential terrorist. And I've got a problem where we have a government that believes that it has the right to abuse your right under the Fourth Amendment. We're nearing a point in time, ladies and gentlemen, where our nation is about to slip underneath the wave of tyranny and totalitarianism. And this is exactly the kind of crap that fosters it. It starts slow, the pot is boiling, the frog is swimming around contented, completely unaware that the temperature is rising. And by the time he finds out that he has reached his imminent end, it's too late. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can catch us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. And you can catch this and every other program on YouTube.
KBMV Birch Tree is the Ozarks' best news talk, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Hi, I'm Scott Corman, president of Community First. We want to be your bank. We believe in the strength of our communities, businesses, families, and future. We're not just locally owned, but community owned. And we operate today just as we started, by living up to our name, putting you and our communities first.
Living up to our name, community first, banking company.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The George Zimmerman jury set to resume deliberations this morning.
The 6-woman jury panel is being asked to consider whether Zimmerman was an overzealous neighborhood watch captain who shot 17-year-old Trayvon Martin out of spite because he fit the profile of recent burglars in the neighborhood. During closing arguments, the prosecution kept referring to Trayvon Martin as a child and said that Zimmerman fired his gun not because he had to, but because he wanted to.
Fox's Jonathan Panseri in Sanford, Florida.
Zimmerman's lawyers, however, argue their client fired in self-defense. They say Trayvon Martin attacked George Zimmerman, banging his head on a sidewalk.
And Republicans in Texas have passed one of the most restrictive abortion bills in the nation. Democrats promising to fight the measure in the courts and at the ballot box. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Get on the fast track to fall enrollment at Missouri State University West Plains College Express, Tuesday, July 23rd at 6 p.m. at the Liebeier Technology Center. College Express will give prospective students the opportunity to explore educational options at Missouri State West Plains and complete many of the processes needed for enrollment in just one evening. It's not too late to enroll for the fall semester, so make plans to attend College Express. To register for the July 23rd event or for more information, call 255-7955.
Weather sponsorships are now available on News Talk 107.1 The Point. Get more information, email info@diamondmediaradio.com for complete details.
From the Point Weather Center for this morning, we'll kick off the weekend with sunshine and a high of 86. It'll depart cloudy tonight at low 60. Sunday should be a mostly sunny day with a high of 86. Monday will start the week with a partly sunny day or high 87. Again, the high for today, 86 under sunny skies, and I'm Rod Tanner. And for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
The temperatures are heating up, and so is the debate. Call and let your voice be heard on the day's most controversial topics, from the Supreme Court's rulings on gay marriage to immigration to the rollout of the Affordable Care Act. No topic is too hot. Plus, will the U.S. and Russia finally strike a deal on the Edward Snowden issue? On the next Alan Colmes Show.
Weekdays 9 to midnight. It's the Alan Colmes Show on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point.
We return. So, in between the break there, the guys were talking about what is the solution to some of these issues. And as you know, those of you who listen on a routine basis, you've heard me say it many, many times. We're beyond a political solution here. And we're now at a point where our nation has, for all intents and purposes, already descended into tyranny. It just hasn't been announced to you on the idiot box. So the real question is, where do we go from here? How do we resolve these problems? If you'd like to call in with your solution or your ideas, I'd be more than happy to hear them. You can call us on our Wits End Classic Barbershop hotline, and you can give us a call at 257-1111, or if you are outside of the local area and you live in the hinterlands, you can call us at 866-554-6636. The idea is, what's necessary as the appropriate step to stop the tyranny? And I submit, as I have many times before, that the only solution that we have at this particular point is for us to massively and peacefully not demonstrate. We're not demonstrating. We're not going to protest. We have to go to state and federal and the federal capital en masse in massive numbers. And I'm talking in the tens of millions. Not 1 million, not 3 million, not 5 million. You know, Mike was just pointing out that if 5 million people were to march on Washington, they'd be treated like the bonus marchers were.
And if you don't know who the bonus marchers are, shame on you. Check out YouTube, Bonus Marchers 1932.
The bonus marchers, for the record, and I'm not going to get into the whole detail. In fact, just go look it up yourself. I'm not even going to school you on it. You ought to know it by now. But the fact of the matter is, what that would mean is that those 4 or 5 or 3 or however many million people would be trampled underfoot and basically removed. So my point is, I won't disagree with that argument. That's why it can't be 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 million. That's why it has to be 25 million. 25 million Americans who literally go to the state and federal capitals and lock them down. Nothing moves. All the streets are closed. All the stores are closed. Everything is shut down. lock this nation down tighter than a goat's butt, freeze all commerce, freeze all payments to the government, starve the beast, and place it under siege, and demand that they leave, and be committed and conditioned to the fact that we won't until they do. When they go, then you have to have a true constitutional body politic to step into that void, the vacuum that would be created by getting 535 members of Congress placed in handcuffs and thrown off to await trial for their treasons and abuses against humanity and the American population in general.
Mike, let me ask you something. Now, what are the logistics for that?
Because
if you're going to have 20 million people show up someplace, how are you going to feed them? How are you going to, provide services and that kind of stuff?
I get it. It's a massive undertaking, and it's fraught with danger, and it's fraught with discomfort, and it's fraught with a lot of major implications that, I'm not saying I've got the solution to everything. I mean, this is not a movement that one person can take on. And it requires planning, and it requires thought, and it requires preparation in the sense that if it occurs before there is a pre-qualified, pre-vetted body politic to step in the place of the terrorists who are currently occupying the government, then it has no chance of success. Because when you throw them out, you've got to have an immediate injection of constitutional individuals who will operate on a one-term window to reestablish commerce, repeal the massive infrastructure of disaster that has been perpetrated on us over the course of the last 50 or 100 years, and simultaneously get the wheels of this country moving again, right? So how do you accomplish that? Well, for starters, one of the first things that could be done is, and I've said this before too, the Tea Party, the Libertarians, the Constitution parties, those groups should be out there organizing and coordinating their efforts and their money and saying, we're going to put this resource towards two things. One, finding, interviewing, qualifying, and vetting proper candidates to replace those that are there now. And two, putting out full-size, full-page, a blanket media campaign. And the concept of this campaign is relatively simple. You can start it out with the major newspapers in the nation. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, LA Times, Miami Herald, whatever. St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Philadelphia Inquirer, just to name a few. That full-page ad should read something akin to seeking candidates, qualified candidates, for a new Republic of the United States of America. List the qualifications and start and have a source where those folks can communicate with a body that will interview them, qualify them, and vet them properly. The purpose behind that is
no shoplifters or bad check writers.
None of those. No wife beaters, no shoplifters, no heavy drinkers, no cocaine users.
I was going to say, no drunks either?
No drunks either.
Oh,
there goes my entire staph infection. The problem is really it's huge in its scope. And I'm not saying I've got this whole thing, pre-qualified out. I'm one guy who's overworked, vastly underpaid, and outgunned, outmanned, outbrained, outnumbered. So I'm merely putting forth the kernel of an idea that I expect others to pick up and run the ball down the field. Nobody wins a game by themselves. You've got 11 people on the team, right? The quarterback doesn't win the game by himself. The pitcher doesn't win the game by himself. The batter doesn't win the game by themselves. They win it in concert with their team members.
How did they work that thing out in Iceland? See, and it's amazing that you find precious little, unless you go on the internet, you find precious little.
You won't find that information unless you seek it out.
You didn't hear anything about that in the U.S. media.
Not at all. Not a word. In fact, Iceland is like persona non grata. They don't even want you to hear or reference the name Iceland. They're not even talking about it in relation to Snowden, by the way.
And they threw their government out.
And prosecuted them. And their bankers. And their bankers.
And it took how long?
Very, very brief window in time. This was right after the collapse of the banking industry in 2008. And they are still prosecuting them.
So it can be done.
It can be done. Of course, don't misunderstand the implications of Iceland doing it versus the entire United States of America doing it. Iceland, while it may be the size of Alaska, is got the population of New Jersey. So, I mean, we're talking about a vastly different economic model, a vastly different national, model. They've got a different,
Yeah, but they had the public will.
What they had that America is lacking is balls.
Okay.
How's that?
All right. No stones, no blue chips, right?
And what they had that America is lacking is the determination and the will to take back what they knew to be theirs in the first place, which had been stolen and usurped from them. You see, this issue is far bigger than just any one issue, any one politician, any one state. We're in a constitutional crisis. And, you've heard me say many times, and I've quoted it many times from Madison, crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. When we hear our government use the word crisis, everything's a crisis. It's a healthcare crisis. It's a drug war crisis. It's a financial crisis. And every one of those crises has come the solution for it has come from government. And inevitably, the cost has either been to the taxpayer or to the American population's freedoms and liberties as committed and guaranteed and delineated and outlined in the Bill of Rights. None of which, by the way, are government delivered. All of which are God-given and natural rights that we had long before civilization was civilization.
I can't nod my head on the radio. It doesn't work, does it?
Doesn't work.
Okay. Here's I got to bring this up while it's on my mind. I'm thinking about it. You talk frequently about regulatory tyranny.
Yeah.
I just saw an interview with Congresswoman out of Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, on TV the other day. The EPA has come out with a 100-page regulation on ceiling fans.
100 pages.
Ceiling fans.
Yeah. Well, wait a second. So that you folks understand the depth of the depravity here. Let's make sure that we're clear. In 2011, Congress passed 81 laws. Right? 81 laws. By the way, somebody pull out a calculator and do the math. 100 senators at $195,000 a year. Not to mention their entire staff infection, which is truly spelled STAPH infection. And 435 House members at $175,000 a year, not to mention their unlimited perks.
Ed has to do the math. I can't.
Their staffs, and all of their expenditures to accomplish that. Not to mention their travel and the freebies and the haircuts and the.
Wait a minute. Don't forget $95,000 worth of coffee and bagels.
Yeah, we're not
per senator.
Right. I mean, if that's not unconscionable. Anyway, Congress passed 81 laws. So you can figure out what it cost us to pass every law. Right?
Ed's working.
Assuming Ed's got good math skills there. He's licking his pencil.
If you had a piece of chalk, he'd be doing better.
Fast Eddie. For this kind of calculation, you'd need one of those chalkboards that spans the room, and it would look like one of those Edisonian or Einsteinian equations.
One of those things on how you get to the moon?
Right, exactly. Anyway, you're right. We don't have enough paper. The point is this. 81 laws were passed by the House and the Senate. 3,800 laws were passed by administrative agencies who have zero accountability, were not elected by anyone, for all intents and purposes, never left it open for public comment, didn't receive any public input, and would have ignored it if they had, and they're not even accountable to Congress.
You know what I find so amazing about that?
Wait a second. What I find the most amazing about that is that the Constitution very clearly states that no law shall be passed except by Congress.
But what I find amazing about that is that Congress allows it to happen, and it dilutes their authority.
It doesn't.
It does.
It doesn't. That's the mistake.
No, I don't believe that. I think it.
All right, let's understand why it doesn't. Or first of all, recognize something, that Congress is delegating our delegated authority to them. They're subdelegating it to administrative agencies, right?
Which is what? Unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional. Clearly, flatly, plainly, inarguably unconstitutional. So, Congress subdelegates the authority we have given them to these administrative agencies. Now, first of all, recognize that these agencies weren't created last year. These agencies have been growing since 1900, late 1800s, actually, right? So the modern Senate is saddled with the sins of the past Congress, or this Congress is saddled with the sins of the past Congress. But on top of that, they while they don't actually have a terrific amount of oversight, as evidenced by the fact that the FBI and the NSA and all these groups walk in there and say, it's really none of your business what we do.
Don't forget the IRS.
And don't forget the Federal Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank.
Which isn't federal and isn't a reserve.
It isn't
federal. It isn't federal and it doesn't have a reserve.
It doesn't have a reserve. Its reserve is our ass, right? Its reserve is your pocketbook and your daily wages. That's its reserve.
Nice.
That is the reserve.
I still haven't gotten over the fact that they call it the Federal Reserve, and it isn't federal, and there's no reserve.
Well, if you ever read Creature from Jekyll Island, and I interviewed what's his name there, G. Edward Griffin. If you've ever read G. Edward Griffin's book on the Federal Reserve called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and if you haven't, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I strongly recommend you get your hands on that. He tells the story about how the Federal Reserve came into being, how it was a secret meeting. It was passed the night before Christmas Eve when everybody had gone home, and they just kept a select quorum there just for the purposes of passing this one bill. And they named it the Federal Reserve with the specific intent that it would fool the American people into thinking that it was a part of the government. That was the point and the purpose. So the intent was for Americans to believe that the Federal Reserve was a department or a division of the Treasury, when in fact it's a private cabal of bankers who aren't even responsible to tell the Treasury. When they ask Bernanke in a Senate hearing what his policies mean or do or what the effect is and how he derived those policies and what his motivating factor was, you know what he tells them?
What?
That's really not your place. Now, this is the monetary policy of the United States of America. They set the interest rates, both long and short term. They have the ability to create treaties with foreign nations to set international monetary rates, to set banking loan rates that we lend to foreign countries. They are the decider and the initiator of the interest rates here in the United States by their monetary policy. And yet it's none of Congress's business as to what that motivated them to do QE infinity, quantitative easing, which, for the record, by the way, $58 million, that's what it cost us, and that would be a very, very, very conservative number.
Yeah, because
$58 million to pass 81 laws, folks.
Yeah, because he don't figure so good.
No. Well...
So the Federal Reserve is setting all of this policy on behalf of the federal government, but they're not part of the government.
And the government's not entitled to know what's the motivating factor for that policy.
Because I always wonder why it is like the head of the Federal Reserve shows up in front of Congress and he's testifying as to all this crap.
Right.
Okay. And I'm like, why is this guy talking to Congress?
And why do they treat him with such deference, like he's the king?
Right.
He is.
But I'm just not understanding. Okay?
Well,
my little brain, my little pea brain, okay, cannot absorb.
The issue here is real simple.
My pea brain?
No, well, that too. The issue here is really simple. You know, Rothschild was attributed with a quote, and I don't know whether he's really the one who came out with it, but I care not a whit who controls the government. Give me control of the money supply, and I will control the world.
All right, I'm back to the whole NASCAR jumpsuit thing.
You lost me there.
Okay. Senators and congressmen should all have to wear a jumpsuit. And people,
orange in nature with stenciled numbers on the back?
No, they get that one later. They get that one later.
I think that should be the uniform today.
They should have to wear a jumpsuit. And everybody that contributes money to their campaign, the more money that you contribute to a senator or a congressman's campaign, a patch has to go on that jumpsuit, just like the NASCAR guys.
Oh, I got
And
you.
if you only give them like $5,000 or $10,000, then a little patch goes on there. Maybe it's 3 or 4 inches in diameter, right? But if you give them like $500,000, it gets to be like a bigger patch, okay?
Sure.
And you have to wear this jumpsuit, okay?
So basically, certain congressmen would be wrapped in a suit that says Google.
Oh, or Monsanto,
or
whoever. Okay, so when you walk on the floor of the Congress or the Senate, and somebody sees you in your jumpsuit, they know who you belong to. They know where your interests are. They know, who it is that contributed to your campaign, and so they already know which way you're going to vote on certain things. And people that are watching on C-SPAN, okay, can look at their elected representatives, and they know who owns them.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but it's unrealistic. The simple truth is the best way to solve that problem is to make them go in the same format but naked, and I don't mean physically or literally.
Ooh, boy!
What I'd rather see is that we make it a criminal penalty for what everyone else calls bribery, they call lobbying. Okay, so when you have a congressman who's accepting money from a lobbyist, that is a criminal enterprise. Nothing more, nothing less. They can call it whatever they want, but I know exactly what it is. It's no different than me offering my driver's license with a $100 bill tucked up underneath it to the officer when he pulls me over and says, roll down the window.
But this issue in reference to money and influence in politics doesn't have a left or a right-hand side to it. Because
both parties have completely abdicated all responsibility towards the law, moral, ethical, and political responsibility and fiduciary responsibility to the citizenry. All are guilty. There is not a single one who is not guilty.
But what I'm saying is that from the standpoint of trying to be an informed and critically thinking voter, okay, and I'm on the right side of the political spectrum, but I have friends that are on the left side of the political spectrum, and they have the exact same concerns about the untoward influence of money within the political system. It's like, I'm worried about what George Soros is spending his money for, and they're worried about what the Koch brothers are spending their money for. It covers the entire political spectrum.
Agreed.
That
and so the best solution to that is to eliminate it.
Right.
Now, part of the concept of the massive, peaceful, civil, disobedient takeover of our government again requires a couple things, and I want to bring this full circle because we've only got about a minute or two left. Part of that requires that these candidates who are being qualified, interviewed, vetted, and so forth, are willing to sign an agreement, a civil agreement, in which they're willing to forfeit their role and position by default. In other words, they pre-agree in advance that not only will I not run more than once, but if I do, you have my commitment or my agreement now that by default I will be removed from office as a penalty. All you got to do is file the suit against me. And a civil court. Okay? So while it's not constitutional, because it's not we can't say this is a constitutional requirement of a term limit, it's a just like you can waive your right to be silent, they can waive their right to be reelected. Can they not? And so by waiving their right, essentially what ends up happening is they have committed that they will serve a term or a period, whatever that agreement is. In the House, it might be 2 terms. In the Senate, it should only be 1. 6 years is too long for anybody to not become compromised. I don't care who you are.
Didn't we have some people that are in the Congress and Senate now that were folks that about 10 years ago went, I'm only in for 1 term?
Yes, of course. They all say the same crap.
Yeah.
My point is, put some teeth to it, right? Make there a bear trap at the other end that they can't avoid. And that bear trap is that they agree as liquidated damages that if they violate that and they attempt to run again, all that has to be done is they have to be served with their resignation or dismissal papers. And they agree in advance that that can be done. Now, that may not be, because we can't do that without a constitutional amendment. You can't state that there's term limits that are in place that aren't there. And the only other way to do it is for Congress to do it, and we can't guarantee that. We can't even begin to count on this Congress to do that.
I don't think they're going to do that to themselves?
I don't think so.
Oh.
So
you don't trust those guys?
I wouldn't trust them with a cookie.
It's the first time I ever saw you when you were at a loss for words.
I wouldn't trust them with a cookie in a Keebler factory. All right, folks, we're going to take a break because it's the top of the hour. You know, we're on our new clock now. It's a half-hour run on either side. And when we come back, we'll address a couple of these other issues. But just stick with us here. We can certainly get even deeper into the weeds here, but I want to talk about this transatlantic investment treaty as we go forward, and we can maybe cover that in the third hour. But it's important that we address some of this stuff. We'll be back in just a moment. Stick with us. You're listening to America's Voice Now.
The Battery Station in West Plains is your headquarters for getting and being prepared. Natural disasters, civil unrest, personal and family protection, long-term sustenance, and most importantly, peace of mind. Berkey bottles and home-sized water purification systems, survival food, MREs, freeze-dried food, survival knives, lanterns, ammunition, military sleep system, and of course, batteries of all shapes and sizes. Take charge of your own